guys, welcome back to Elephants in the Room. My name is Nicole and I'm your host. If you are new here, I talk about all of the elephants in the room and try to address and explore the things that we all go through, but sometimes we feel uncomfortable, embarrassed, or scared to talk about because we're all just trying to figure out this life and it can be really tricky and confusing. And I think the worst thing we can do is try to do it alone and try to do it isolated. And oftentimes when we don't talk about these things, they feel bigger than they actually are. And so my hope is that by being vulnerable about my struggles and what I go through day to day in my life will inspire you and help you feel less alone in it. So I truly believe that vulnerability creates freedom and connection. And so that is why I'm here and why I'm talking to you right now. If you are a frequent listener, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into today's episode. So this episode is actually, I'm filming it obviously before, but you guys are going to be hearing this just very shortly before Thanksgiving. So happy holidays. It is the holiday season. And I thought, what better way to kick off the holidays on Elephants in the Room than talk about the holidays. So today is my first part of my holiday special, holiday series, and it is about when family doesn't feel like home anymore. And the reason I want to talk about this is because during the holidays, it's one of the most magical, beautiful times of the year in a lot of ways, but it's also one of the hardest times of the year for many, many people, because just as much as holidays put such a strong emphasis on connection, on family, on relationships, on gathering, it also, on the opposite end, kind of puts a big emphasis and shines a big light on disconnection and strained relationships. Like if you're not in a good place with your family, or if you're not who you used to be and you don't feel accepted or loved, or you don't know how to show up as your new self with your family, it kind of puts an emphasis on all those things. And it's funny because I feel like, when we're changing or we've grown into someone that our family doesn't necessarily like, our family doesn't necessarily agree with, we've kind of stepped out of the norm for what our bloodline represents, what it stands for, or maybe we've just had a really, really hard year emotionally, physically, mentally. Maybe we're going through something really traumatic, whether it's, a strained relationship, a loss at a job, a relationship falling apart, a divorce, losing someone, losing something, some sort of grief. I think the holidays can be so intense on both sides of things because, like I said, it's the happiest time of the year for a lot of people, but the hardest time of the year for a lot of people, because when we are going through really, really tough seasons in life, or we are in really, really tough places with our family and we don't feel like they're our home anymore, it puts an emphasis on that and it puts a light on that. And also, naturally, most of our families come together for the holidays. And so if you do have a strained relationship with your family, or you are starting to identify or see maybe some of your unhealthy generational trauma or patterns or dysfunction, some of the dysfunction that your family has. Maybe you're in therapy, maybe you have changed what you believe in. Maybe you didn't go to college and your family wanted you to go to college. Maybe you're going through a divorce. Whatever it is, maybe you've had the hardest year ever and you've had so much failure. There is so much pressure and stress that goes into seeing and being with our family during all of those times. And so it can be one of the loneliest and hardest times of the year. And I think also the trickiest time to navigate. Now, there's a million other reasons why you can be struggling during the holidays. I'm not going to talk about all of them today. That's kind of going to be the focus of the first part of this series. But I have such a heart for this because I've been through this. And I've spent many holidays alone. I've spent many holidays sad, grieving, and it's not fun because everyone around you is so happy and having so much joy. And I think we have such high expectations for ourselves and for how we're supposed to feel during the holidays. And I think it's such an internal battle because I think there is such a beauty in gratitude and understanding that the true meaning of Christmas isn't even having a perfect Christmas and feeling good. It's about giving. And there's still beauty in the pain, but also we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people on social media, in life, and seeing how happy they are during the season. So when we're not happy and everyone around us is happy, it reminds us how unhappy we are and how much pain we're experiencing or how much sadness we're experiencing. So it's just like really, really shines a light on what's going on. And that can be challenging. So we're going to talk about it because I want to help you guys walk through it, understand it more, and just help you guys feel less alone because it's real and it does happen. So first, I want to dive a little bit into my story of some of the times I've really struggled during the holidays and when I've really felt like my family has not felt like home anymore. So for anyone who doesn't know my origin story, I grew up with addict parents. I grew up in the LDS church. I was Mormon and grew up in a very broken home and got married when I was 18 in the temple and then divorced shortly after. And here I am now. And now I'm a Christian. I actually left the religion to give my life to Jesus. So it's a long story. But all of that to say, I think when I first really started to feel the weight of my family not feeling like my home anymore was shortly after I split up with my ex-husband and when I was separated leading into my divorce and even post-divorce. Now, to give you a little bit of backstory on that, I think a big part of the reason why I felt that way was because growing up, I was a codependent people pleaser who was an extremely quote unquote good member of the church. I loved the church. I did everything right. I saved myself for marriage. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I followed all the rules. I was not contentious. I was not someone that wasn't I was really nice, like too nice, you know? Yeah, I let people walk all over me. I didn't have much of a self-esteem. And that's who I was. That's what I grew up as. And sadly, that is something that is passed down to me from generations. My grandma was cheated on in her marriage and left, and he left her for a younger woman, and she experienced a lot of pain and trauma. And my mom was in many toxic and abusive relationships. My dad was not faithful to her, was physically abusive to her. And all of that to say, not that that directly correlates to my story, but my mom, my grandma, they were people who didn't know how to stand up for themselves and who overextended themselves to everyone and to the point where it beat them down to nothing and that it led them into these really unhealthy situations and relationships. And I think it was just my story of origin to survive through my childhood to become a people pleaser and to become someone who was a peacekeeper. I just wanted to keep the peace. I didn't know how to deal with conflict, to be honest. And not all in an extreme way. Like, I'm sure there were ways that I did. But all of that to say, hopefully that paints a little bit of a picture of who I was and who my family knew me as. And so then I get married in the temple and everyone's so excited and happy for me and trusts me and thinks I'm, doing the right things, right? I get married when I'm 18, which is like the thing to do. And then I shortly after end up getting a divorce. And amidst my separation is actually when I started to develop a relationship with Jesus. And that is actually what ultimately made me leave the LDS religion, the religion that I grew up in my whole life, the religion that all of my family members still were, or at least most of them. And so the divorce led me to leave. It wasn't the divorce, but it was during that time that it led me to actually leave the religion. And if any of you know anything about Mormonism, you know that leaving the religion, especially growing up in Utah, is not easy to do. It's not super encouraged or accepted. So it was super scary. It was super, super scary. And I knew a huge part of me leaving the religion was me accepting that I knew that my relationships with my family would never be the same, or at least most of them. And that was a really hard pill to swallow because, like I said, I feel like before I left the religion, I was pretty well liked and respected by my family. And so I think it was a hard pill to swallow. It was a very hard pill to swallow. And so, amidst my separation, divorce, during the holidays was like hell for me. Because not only was I going through so much, so much, and I had such a pressure and fear of being around family because I felt like my divorce was such a failure. I felt like such a failure, and I hated people asking me about it. I hated talking about it because I felt like such a failure, and I was so fragile at the time. And so I didn't feel like I had the energy or the capacity or the ability to be able to even take in people's critiques, opinions, advice during that separation season of my life because I was so heartbroken and I was so distraught and I was going through so much pain. And so being around family and having them ask me all the questions and, oh, how's your marriage and this and that, and knowing my marriage is falling apart, it felt so vulnerable and exposing and embarrassing. And so I think we need to remember when we are going to be around family, and this kind of ties to what I'm talking about, but it's kind of separate. When you are not performing or achieving, or you're not where you thought you were going to be in life, and maybe you've had some failures or redirections, not that I think it's a failure, but your family may view it that way. It's super scary. It's super scary to walk into a room with your family and have to tell them that your life is falling apart. It's super scary because for most of the year, we can kind of isolate ourselves in a way and or choose to not share certain details, or we have a way of being able to have conversations with family that are more structured and have more boundaries. Like we may get on the phone with them and be able to talk about things, but we don't necessarily have to tell them everything that's going on in our lives, or at least the gruesome details. But when we show up to an event and or a holiday gathering, Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever it is, we have to show up as ourselves. And it's kind of like scary because especially in those vulnerable and intimate settings and places, there's not much you can do to really protect yourself in a way. Like if people have questions for you or whatever it may be, you're going to have to face it in a way. And so for me, it's like me showing up to Christmas, and this was like right before I left the church, so my family didn't know. But the first Christmas that was really hard for me in regards to not feeling like my family felt like home anymore was the year I was like separated with my ex-husband, and I had to tell everyone because guess what? It was the elephant in the room. Because when I showed up by myself, not with my spouse. So it's like everyone's wondering, what's going on? And so it's like it's very exposing to go back home for the holidays because sometimes you have to face and or deal with things you're not ready to talk about yet. And that's so important because I think it is so challenging to walk in a room with your family who doesn't even feel like home anymore and have them question and have them critique and have them judge and have them see the deep, deep, deep wounds that are being exposed in the tragedy of what your life is at the moment. Whether you're going through a divorce, you're grieving something, you lost something, you got fired, whatever it is that's happening with you. Maybe you went through health issues, maybe you, whatever. You are exposed in that moment, and it's really scary and it's really uncomfortable because maybe you're not ready to talk about it yet. Maybe you're not ready to deal with it. Maybe you are so paralyzed by your own emotions from the situation and the tragedy that you're going through that walking into a room and allowing the closest people in your life, or at least the people that are supposed to be the closest to you, open to judge you, to see it, to ask questions, to share their opinions with you. Sometimes it's too much for you. You're too fragile, you're too delicate. And so it can feel so sad and overwhelming and anxiety inducing to be with your family during the holidays when you're going through a tragedy. And maybe you have a family that makes you feel comfortable and seen and loved no matter where you are, no matter what you've been through in the year. But I don't know that I have had that experience really fully, or that most people do. And I think that's because family dynamics are hard. Not to say that your family doesn't love you, but I think especially when you come with a family with dysfunction, or a family that's super rooted in religion, it's not always that way. And so to walk into the next part of, the time that I really started to feel like my family wasn't my home anymore was that following year when I left the church. And I won't get into all the nitty-gritty of how or when or whatever with my family, but all you guys need to know is that I had left the church and I had accepted my relationships would change, but I wasn't ready to tell my family yet. And unfortunately, someone that I did tell ended up telling the rest of my family. So it was exposed to my family before I felt like I was ready. And also amidst this is when I actually started going to therapy. I started identifying how unhealthy my family was, how much dysfunction there was within my family, how much unhealthiness was in a lot of the relationships in my family. And, I had started to see my own unhealthy coping mechanisms and habits and how unhealthy I was, and that I was a people pleaser, I was codependent. Not that I was those things, but I struggled with those things. I struggled with low self-esteem. I struggled with all these different things, and I was a peacekeeper, not a peacemaker. And so that year, not only did I leave the church, but I actually started to love and respect myself more than loving, pleasing others. Because part of learning how to love and respect yourself is also accepting that some people may not like you. Some people may not agree with you. But if you know at your core that you're doing what's right for you and what you believe is true, that matters more to you than the comfort and the peace that comes with pretending to be someone that you're not to please other people. And so going into this year, not only had I left the church, but I also was not the person that my family knew me as. I wasn't the pushover. I wasn't the girl that anyone could just walk over. I wasn't someone who would just keep the peace over being a peacemaker, which I think actually takes discomfort in the beginning. And so all of that to say, that year going into the holidays, it was super discouraging because not only was I going through a divorce and needed the most love and support I had ever needed in my life, but I also had left the church. And all I wanted more than anything when I left the church and got divorced and started changing through therapy and healing and all these things, there's nothing I needed and wanted more than the love and support of the people who were supposed to be closest to me and the people who were supposed to love me the most. And so going through such a challenging time in life and then not feeling accepted and loved by the people you love most sucks. It sucks. Now, this is not a pity party or a I'm the victim and I'm perfect and they're not. No, I get it. I understand. And it did take me time to recognize, but guys, if your family doesn't understand who you are, they don't accept you, and they treat you differently, they try to bring you back and rope you into the old version that you used to be, it's not because they don't love you, it's because they don't know any better. And in their own minds, they probably think that's the best way to love you. And you know that it's not. You know that you need respect, love, acceptance. But in their minds, under whatever programming they're under, with whatever experience they have, with whatever knowledge they have, I can almost guarantee you for most family, they think they're doing what's best for you. And that sucks. That sucks. Because oftentimes it's the worst thing for your relationship with them. Because we deeply desire to feel close to our family. And so that year, I felt so disconnected. And there was such a weird elephant in the room. It's like everyone knew I left the church. No one agreed with me. Everyone thought I was lost. Yet I never have felt more found and more free and more certain in my life. And I think the reason that this can feel so heavy when we don't feel accepted and understood by family, and we've changed, and when family doesn't feel like home anymore, it feels so heavy because psychologically, holidays are rituals for belonging. And I mean specifically during the holidays. Our brains associate them with safety, community, and identity. When relationships are strained, your body feels that loss as danger. This creates emotional exhaustion. Your nervous system is in conflict between connection and rejection. That's why it's not just in your head when you feel drained after family events. It's your body's stress response. Ooh, guys, rejection. I don't think we feel rejection heavier than with our family. When you are not who you once were and you are trying to be authentically as you are, you've left home, you've changed, you've grown, you've gone through hard things, your mind has changed, your opinions have changed. When you go back home to people who all operate the same still and all believe in the same thing still, and they don't accept you and they don't understand you and they think you're lost and they think you are going off the path, there is nothing more heavy than the rejection from your own bloodline, from your family. To feel rejected by your family is so much heavier than feeling rejected by anyone else. Because these are like the people in your life that are supposed to be the closest thing to you. So it's so hard. So I want to talk about when you've changed and they haven't. Like I said, maybe this year for the holidays, you're showing up as a new version of yourself, the healed version of yourself, the changed version of yourself, the version of yourself that actually sets boundaries, the version of yourself that actually respects yourself, the version of yourself that maybe thinks differently than you used to, the version of yourself that your family doesn't agree with, the version of yourself that your family doesn't recognize, the version of yourself that your family doesn't understand. And feeling misunderstood and less at home with your family than with strangers is sad. It's painful to feel like you feel more accepted and loved and understood by strangers than you do your own family. And it's also sad for them because oftentimes when family pushes back on the new version of yourself that you are, it's because they simply don't have the experience, the knowledge, or the understanding that you have of what you've been through in your life to get you to that point. And so I know this sucks to hear, but it's usually not personal. Your family's problems with you are probably not personal. And as twisted as it sounds, they may believe that their unacceptance, their opinions, their position that they are putting on you of how they feel may be the only way they know how to love you. And that sucks because oftentimes it's the thing that makes you feel the most unloved. But I think it's taken me a long time to understand and realize, but we have to understand that when we change and when we feel like family isn't home anymore and we're going into these rooms and we're doing these things, your family has probably been doing the same thing for years and years and years and years, potentially even generations and generations. So you changing right before their eyes and having the courage to step out in that change authentically probably is uncomfortable to them, probably is scary to them. Not because they don't love you, but they don't know. They don't know that. They have not walked in your shoes just like you haven't walked in theirs. And so I think trying to accept and understand that you have a right to change and you have a right to be a different version of yourself, but your family also has a right to not understand you. And that sucks. It sucks to feel like, oh, my family doesn't accept me. My family doesn't love me. My family doesn't get me, especially during the holidays. But just as much as you have a right to feel the way that you do, they do too. And I know that sucks. And I know it's so hard to separate those things because we naturally all have ways that we like to receive love. And obviously there's common decency and respect that I think we all deserve. But I just think you need to remember, and something that I've learned as I've walked through a lot of pain and grief during the holidays is that it's usually not personal and your family's usually doing the best that they can based on the knowledge that they have, what they've walked through in their own life experience. And oftentimes they're doing the best that they can. And I think that sucks to, it's a hard reality to accept, but like, guys, like, for example, when I left the church, I think I grew an understanding for how my family felt because when I was a member of the church and I had a loved one leave the church, I was shattered. I was disappointed. I was sad. I felt all of the ways that they feel about me. So I get it. And I have learned to not hold it against them or to take it personal. But it definitely doesn't mean that it doesn't suck and that it's not hard for everyone involved, because I know that because we love our family so deeply, all of us do, and it's so ingrained within us, even the way that we were designed, when we have family strain in relationships and when we have disagreements and all these things, it's painful. And it's painful to hurt the people that you love by trying to do the right thing. And that goes on both ends. And so as much as I believe that it's right to stand for truth and to share my story and to share what I've been through and to sit on this podcast and do what I do, I know that in a way it hurts some of the people that I love because they don't agree. They don't think it's right. And them not understanding me and feeling misunderstood and not feeling like my heart posture is understood by my family also is painful for me because I do care about how my family feels about me. So it's so tricky. And this all just ties into feeling like home isn't your family anymore. Feeling like you don't belong. Now, I think it's important to talk about how we kind of navigate these holiday gatherings. Because I just want to remind you, you don't have to show up to everything. And it doesn't make you a bad person. But on that same end, I do think that finding the balance between, like, I think when I first started healing, I just thought, this is all too hard. I have to cut everything off. It was really hard for me to show up in those rooms with family and not set certain boundaries and not do certain things. And it's not to say that I regret ever not showing up to something when I knew that I couldn't handle it. But also, I do think there is a beauty in and showing up anyways, even when sometimes it's a little uncomfortable, and accepting and loving your family and the situation for what it is, and still having gratitude for them, and trying to find a way to be different and still love each other. And in some of my relationships with family, I've been able to find that, and it's so beautiful. Like, I have a sister who we think completely differently. We have completely different life views, completely different beliefs, morals, not morals, but we just are so different. And we fought. We've definitely fought. We've had some gnarly fights. But I now feel like I'm at a place in my relationship with her, at least on my end, that I feel like we found such a more authentic and genuine relationship because we've learned to love each other despite our differences, even though we are so different. And so sometimes peace during the holidays does mean staying home, does mean not going. But it's important to remember that doesn't make you cold, that doesn't make you bad. Sometimes we either have to not attend these gatherings, or we just need to walk in them with better boundaries and knowledge and set ourselves up for more success, So whatever that looks like for you, maybe if your family, isn't the healthiest and there's a lot of dysfunction and there's going to be fighting and you're going to feel uncomfortable, maybe it's getting your own place and not staying directly with your family. Maybe it is setting certain boundaries with them before you go. Maybe it's texting that aunt that always asks you the questions that are so overbearing and inappropriate and saying, hey, just so you know, I don't want to talk about religion while I'm there. Or, hey, just so you know, I would appreciate if you didn't ask about this or that. And there's a nice way to go about that. But there are ways you can set boundaries or have conversations prior to the holidays with family to say, hey, I really want to have fun. I really want to enjoy my time with you. And so if we could just not talk about this or not talk about that, that would be amazing. And that's okay to do. Just because someone's your family doesn't mean that just because someone's your family doesn't mean you owe them every detail of your life. It doesn't mean you owe them a conversation about something that you disagree on. It doesn't mean that you owe them having no boundaries just because they're family. Anything goes because they're family. No, it's okay to try to set boundaries with them to protect the relationship, to be able to protect the holidays, to be able to have a successful holiday together. That doesn't make you mean, that doesn't make you evil, and maybe they don't understand it or agree, but there's nothing wrong with trying to ask for it and trying to create those boundaries in that space to protect everyone. So, if you go to these family gatherings and you maybe are feeling scared or fearful because you don't feel fully safe or comfortable there, I think just remembering to decide what's off limits, have an exit plan if you need one, have a room you can go to if you need to just go cry for 5 minutes, and try to, just be patient and kind with yourself and with them. But yeah, I think having a plan, whatever that looks like I said, if you know you're walking into a really dysfunctional family function, or you're going through something and you're really fragile, or you are not the same person you were before and you know your family doesn't like you or accept you or understand you, just having parameters around the holidays to protect yourself, that's not selfish. And there's nothing wrong with that. And whatever that looks like for you, whatever that means for you, it's going to be different for everyone. Like I said, certain boundaries before walking into some of these rooms, sending a text communicating that you're not comfortable talking about certain things, staying at a friend's house or someone separate than actually being in your family home, because then you have to be with them 24/7 and you don't have a place to go and decompress, or making sure that you bring something that you can use to cope, whether that's a book or going on a walk, like trying to support yourself within these family systems. I don't think that's bad or wrong. And your family may not understand and not get it and be like, why can't you just be with family and just pretend everything's fine? And you can do that, but would you rather crash and burn and be bitter and angry and sad with no boundaries, but kind of please your family? Or would you rather walk in with some boundaries and some sort of structure and actually be able to have more meaningful time with your family, and you're not so bitter and stressed out and burnt out? And you know what I mean? It's like, what's better? And I think for me, the second one is better. The next one, like I said, we kind of talked about this, but don't mirror the behavior that hurt you. You can love them without becoming them. It's not they hurt me, so I'll hurt them back. It's choosing to be different. Healing means compassion over control and peace over pride. You can be kind and still have boundaries. That's strength, not weakness. I think it's super easy when struggling with family dynamic and family dysfunctions during the holidays to feel like you just want to match fire with fire. And if they're mean to you, or they're disrespectful, or they don't accept you, or they try to prove that you're wrong, you want to kind of tap in and meet them where they're at with that same energy. And I've done that in the past, but I have learned that's not the way that I want to live, and that's not the way I want to lead my relationships. That doesn't mean I can't have a backbone. That doesn't mean I can't stand up for myself. That doesn't mean I can't have boundaries. But I think learning to rise above and to treat them the way you would want to be treated, with love, with respect, with grace, with understanding, and as hard as it may be, trying your best to understand them. Even if where they're at is a place you're like, I don't get it. How could you treat me this way? How could you feel this way about me? How could you not accept me? Why do you live your life like this? Well, I can promise you they're looking at you feeling the same way. And so I say that to say, have grace and compassion and boundaries. Now, again, every situation is so unique, and I want to preface with that. Your family may just like straight up be toxic or abusive. And if that's the case, some of this doesn't apply. Sometimes you do need to remove yourself. Sometimes you need to not show up to these things. So every situation is very unique, and I encourage you, if you're going through family struggles, especially during the holidays, get a therapist, because a therapist is not only qualified, but really understands the brain and the dynamics between all this and can actually be able to assess your situation. I can't. So speaking to a therapist can really help you determine what or where you should be in these situations and how to deal with them. I'm just sharing my very general advice to you guys. Yeah, man, it's so hard, guys. It's so hard. Like I said, the holidays are one of the hardest times for those who are hurting and for those who are grieving, and especially for those who don't feel like their family is their home anymore. People who feel like they've changed, who feel like they're not who they once were, walking back into family settings and dynamics that you've tried to outgrow and that you've tried to change. is so challenging. Being around people that you don't feel like love and accept you is so challenging. And then on top of that, it's even more challenging knowing and or feeling this expectation to be so happy and have so much joy. It's hard. And my goal of talking about this isn't to push us into a sad place and just say, well, fine, let's just be sad and let's just, let's hate the holidays. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. But guys, if we don't address and or validate these feelings that we have, it is hard to actually have joy. And that's why I feel like in general and in life, when we address the elephant in the room, we then at least it like relieves the pressure. It's like you finally give a voice to what's gnawing at you and speaking at you, but you can't give a voice to it. And when you finally give a voice to it, I feel like then you can actually breathe and then actually walk into these rooms and have fun, and walk into these rooms and have joy, and walk into these rooms and love these people and let them love you the best they can. Like, the goal is not to put so much emphasis on these things or to be negative. It's to address them to then be able to move forward from them, right? Because when we shove things down and when we pretend these feelings and these things don't exist, they just grow, or at least for me. So that is a reason why I really feel compelled to talk about these things. And I want to pull up one other thing here. So I want to mention there's a thing called family systems theory. Families function like emotional systems. When one person changes, the entire system resists that change to restore balance. That's why your growth can trigger discomfort in others. I think one of the really challenging things about walking in rooms with your family that doesn't accept you, understand you, or know how to love you properly anymore is that it is so easy to get lost in trying to keep the peace and trying to feel connected to them in the way that sometimes we fall back into our old selves, who we used to be, our old patterns, our story of origin. And I think that that's really normal. And that, that ties into, so I want to talk about this because this is a part that I skipped on accident, but it's really important to talk about. I want to talk about the temptation to mirror. When family rejects or misunderstands us, our instinct is to often mirror it, to meet coldness with coldness, distance with distance, silence with silence. But that only deepens the divide. True emotional maturity means not mirroring dysfunction. That doesn't mean tolerating disrespect or pretending it doesn't hurt. It just means staying anchored in your own integrity. The goal isn't to win, it's to stay well. Okay, yeah, this is something I want to talk about because I think when I first started walking in to family gatherings with people that I knew didn't understand me anymore, and I felt very misunderstood by them, I really wanted to prove to them that I was doing the right thing. And I really, in a way, wanted to be right. And so I sometimes too intensely tried to explain and justify my reason for leaving the church or whatever it may be. And I think I had to accept and understand that it's not about being right. It's not about winning the conversation or proving to them. I had a little interruption. But yeah, I just think it's not about being right and it's not about proving yourself, because at the end of the day, like, it's okay to be misunderstood, and it's okay to let people be who they are, just as you want your family to be who you are. It's okay to let them be who they are. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't encourage them. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't call them to higher if there really is dysfunction. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be honest with them. But I think there's a way to do it. And I think in the past I've done it in the wrong way, and I've learned that's not the point. The next thing, this is from chat. So shout out ChatGPT. But I want to talk about the psychology of family disconnect. So identity dissonance. It's the internal tension we feel when the people closest to us don't recognize who we've become. And for many people, especially those from close-knit or religious families, this can trigger feelings of guilt, shame, and rejection. Our brains are wired for belonging. It's one of the most primal human needs. So when the place that was supposed to be our safest, our family, becomes the place we feel most unseen, our nervous system goes into conflict. That's why I think the holidays can feel so anxiety-inducing. And then, this is one other thing I wanted to talk about in regards to all of this, because I think when you're walking in rooms with family that you don't really feel like you fit in with anymore, and when you feel like you've changed for the better and you've grown and you've outgrown some of the family dysfunction you've started to identify, whether that's in therapy or just through life, and you've started to outgrow what you grew up in, when you are back with family, it is so easy to forget what you've learned and to by default go back to who you were before the positive change in your life. And this is called the family role or something to explain this. A psychology fact to explain this is the family role regression. It's the phenomenon where no matter how much we've grown, being around our family can pull us back into old roles: the peacemaker, the caretaker, the overachiever, the one who holds it all together. And that regression can make even the healthiest, most self-aware adult feel 14 again. So when you've done the real work on yourself, when you've healed, found your voice, set boundaries, and then you go back to people who still see you as old you, it can feel like emotional whiplash. I think it is weird and hard to walk in rooms with family, and especially when we don't feel like they're our home anymore, and not fall back into our old patterns and not fall back into our old ways and not fall back into the parts of us that we have outgrown, the parts of us that we've changed for the better. It's so easy to feel like you have to be exactly who your family knows you as and exactly who you feel like your family loves and accepts. It's really easy to fall back into that role and to fall back into who you once were around them, to gain peace, to gain closeness, to feel acceptance, to feel love. And with that, I just want to encourage you that whether your family understands you or not, there is someone out there who is proud of you and who understands you. And being misunderstood by your family is hard, but it doesn't mean that what you're doing and what you've done and the changes you've made in your life are wrong or they're bad. And I think it's really hard because I think sometimes we do associate the discomfort of our family not agreeing or not understanding us or what we've done or who we are or where we are going. We associate it with failure because we desire such a deep acceptance and love and support from our family. And so I just think when you are walking these rooms during these family gatherings, especially during the holidays, remember the truth, remember who you are, remember what you've walked through, and remember that it's okay to be misunderstood by the people that are supposed to understand you the most and love you the most. And it doesn't mean they don't love you. It just means they may not know how to love you the way you need to be loved right now. And you're not alone in it. And I know it's hard. And finding the balance between it all is really tricky. Finding the balance between being able to have joy and excitement and connection during the holidays with our family, and also understanding and acknowledging the elephant in the room, that our family doesn't feel like our home anymore, is really hard. So like I said, grace and not mirroring the behavior that has been done to you. Treat them how you would want to be treated and love them the way you would want to be loved. And sometimes that's understanding that the way they're treating you may be really hurtful and you may not understand it, but it may be the only way they know how to show you love right now. And the next thing I want to just kind of close this out with is, I think as we grow up, at least for me, we start to understand, and this is a term that actually one of my friends shared with me, that sometimes home isn't always where you grew up. And sometimes we will develop something I like to call chosen family. Sometimes we feel more comfortable, more loved, more accepted, more seen by people who actually have no obligation to love us, which is crazy when we think about it, and which can sometimes feel hard and painful. But on the other end, I think it's because there is sometimes less of a programming and less of a enmeshment with people that we don't know than people that we grew up with. So sometimes it is easier to love and support and understand someone who isn't your family. But on that same coin, it also can feel a little sad, but also encouraging that sometimes people know how to love you better than your actual family who have no obligation to love you. So if you feel like you're struggling with family this season, I just want to encourage you that you're not broken, you're not alone, you're not unlovable, you're not unworthy, and more people are struggling with this than you know. It's pretty common, and there are seasons for everything. There are seasons where you will struggle in these family gatherings. There are seasons where you won't feel understood, but there are also seasons where you will rebuild, you will reconnect, you will have good seasons as well. You have good holidays. I always used to remind myself that when I was going through a Christmas or a Thanksgiving where I felt so alone and I felt so isolated or I was struggling, I just had to remind myself, like, there's so many more holidays to come. And I believe that there is a season for everything, and there are going to be seasons that are harder than others. And specifically for today's episode, holiday seasons that will be harder than others. But there will also be holiday seasons that are so much more beautiful than others. And I totally believe that there is healing and restoration within family systems. And I totally do believe that there is a place where you can believe in completely different things than someone and still love them radically. And I think that that's a place I strive and want to continue to get into my life more, because there's so many people, whether it's friends or family, that I used to be able to connect to so deeply because we believed in the same things and because we were the same type of people. And now that we're not, it's hard. But what I will say to encourage you guys is that those very few family relationships and friendship relationships that I do have with people who do believe in things so differently than me are so amazing, so real, so genuine. And they're some of my closest and deepest and most beautiful relationships that I have, and ones I'm most grateful for. And not all of your relationships will survive, at least not the way you thought when you change, but some of them will. And some of them will be better for it. And like I said, I do believe there is healing and restoration in family relationships, but sometimes it takes work and sometimes it takes time and sometimes it never happens, and that's okay. So I love you guys so much. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. The holiday seasons are here, which is crazy. Like I said, this episode I think comes out, let me check because I have it in my notes, so I need to just be accurate here. November 19th. So right before Thanksgiving. Obviously, I'm filming this before. But I hope you guys have a good holidays, and I hope that you feel loved and seen in some way by someone. And yeah, I love you guys. And I just encourage you guys to remember the true meaning of Christmas and the holidays and all the things. And I think It's love and giving, and for me, the celebration of my faith in Jesus. But whatever that is for you, I pray that you're able to focus on some of the good parts of it while also acknowledging some of the hard parts of it. So being able to walk in the joy of the holidays, but not ignore the hard parts either. So I love you guys so much. If you'd like to support me, you guys can follow this podcast on all social media platforms, Elephants in the Room on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and then you can go and listen to it on Spotify, Apple Music, all the places. Leave me a rating and review. That helps me so much. Share it with a friend, share it on your story. And then any ideas you guys have for new episodes, any things you want me to talk about, let me know. And yeah, I'll close this episode out by saying, what elephants are in your room? My name is Nicole, and I'll talk to you guys in 2 weeks.